Participation is the key to empowering people, and digital technology can be a strong vehicle to strengthen the participatory governance, particularly focused on the vulnerable. So, I'd like to share my presentation pertaining to participatory governance and digitalization that I delivered in 2018 at the 6th OECD World Forum. This presentation was also shared with my future students in KDI school last Thursday. The topic of presentation is Participatory Governance to Empower the Vulnerable in the Era of Digitalization. This is how my presentation today will be structured. First, I'll explain about the importance of inclusiveness in the era of digital transformation. Then, I'll elaborate on how participatory governance empowers the vulnerable groups. Thirdly, I'll show how digitalization can facilitate public participation. Then, I'll explain the challenge of digital divide, which should be set as a priority agenda of the state. Finally, I'll close my presentation with several key messages. First of all, digital transformation may bring many opportunities while entailing the challenge of widening social inequality. This will leave further behind the vulnerable groups such as women, old persons, persons with disabilities, youth, and refugees or migrants. In this regard, government has to address inclusiveness in the era of digital transformation. Achieving inclusiveness is in alignment with the overarching principle of the 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is leaving no one behind. To achieve inclusiveness, public participation is the most important factor through which the vulnerable groups can be empowered and we can achieve well-being for all. This table is from the World Public Sector Report 2018 of UN. We can see the increasing level of public impact. Through engaging the public, government can inform the citizens and consult and involve and collaborate with the public in the decision-making processes. Ultimately, the public can be empowered to participate in the final decision-making process. Similarly, this diagram from an OECD report also depicts different levels of stakeholder engagement. We can see that co-decision and co-production is the final process of engagement. This leads to balanced share of power among the stakeholders. Public participation and engagement can create the balance of power between government and citizens. We all know that government is very powerful. It plays significant roles in budget, personnel, and law and regulations, and it is based on the nature of promoting public value. Empowering citizens, particularly the vulnerable groups, through participation and engagement can narrow down the gap of power between government and citizens. Public participation can also function as public control to enhance transparency and accountability of government. Now, we are going to have specific policy cases to empower the vulnerable. Before proceeding substantive policy practices of participatory governance, I'd like to share my experience, which gave me a profound impact on the importance of participation throughout my civil service career. It is a good instance of how community members grow through an empowerment process. When I was a graduate student at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, I was involved in making a community development plan for a community located in the central area of Detroit. The community, called Emmanuel, was totally torn down, with about 9,000 residents, and most of them relied on food coupons. During the year of 1998 to 1999, we tried to build the development plan with the community members because one of the important purposes of the project was to empower the community members through the entire planning process. It was essential to making them participate in the planning and decision-making process. So we decided to have town hall meetings with the residents once every 2 weeks. We met the residents at the church located at the center of the community, but then any residents were not willing to say, and they looked shy and distressed. They seemed to be passive and dependent. However, we tried to keep discussing with them in every town hall meeting to draw out what they really wanted, what they were interested in, what facilities were needed in this area, what they should do to develop their community, what they could do for their own for all of these, and so on. Thanks to this continuous effort, we eventually came to see dramatic change to the residents at the wrap-up day of the project. Almost every person readily expressed his or her opinion. Their speeches were very communicative, and particularly in terms of the contents, those conveyed critical and independent thoughts. Most of them were not those who they were a year ago. They transitioned themselves from passive and dependent followers to active, independent, and critical persons with the potential to develop as leaders. I still remember this dramatic change occurred to these people, and this is an example or proof that we can empower citizens by participation and the process of learning by doing. I confirmed that the development program would be able to sustain by bringing up leaders and empowering citizens after retreating professionals or governments. I heard that Emmanuel community members collaborated and put their efforts to develop their community, regardless of many obstacles, and in this process, some residents empowered by the project committed themselves to community in an active, participatory manner. Now, I'd like to introduce several policy cases of participatory governance. First case is participatory budgeting. Many of you may be well aware that more than 1,500 cities are adopting this practice. Local residents can propose projects based on their real needs and vote to select the projects. One good example is the process by the New York City Council. New Yorkers, including the vulnerable, can make proposals on this online map and they participate in the voting process. However, one limitation of participatory budgeting cannot guarantee the citizen participation in the whole process, like policy formation, designing, implementing, evaluation. In this regard, I want to introduce the Civic Participatory Service Design Team of the Republic of Korea. At both national and local level, citizens actively participate in the process of designing the policies and interact with the government. Throughout the participatory processes in policy formulation, designing, and implementation, citizens can proactively provide inputs pertaining to their demands and opinions. Through this, the limitation of the participatory budgeting can be overcome by engaging the public in the whole process of policy making and implementation. There are many particular cases where the vulnerable groups are actively participating in the service designing process. The case of School of Grammar is one successful case from the Civic Participatory Service Design Team, particularly in the light of empowering participants. Elderly women actively participate in the process of program planning and management implementation of this school for the older persons run by a municipality in Seoul. They are not just receiving education and training, Instead, they proactively contribute to the local society by sharing the results of their learning and experiences. With good trainings, for example, they perform as store teachers at local kindergartens or participate in local environment campaigns. During this empowering process, their passive roles as recipient of welfare policy can be transformed into community leaders. Now, in this part, I'd like to highlight the important role of digitalization in facilitating public participation. Leveraging innovation and digitalization makes public participation easier and faster, particularly for the private sector. This furthermore enhances government transparency and accountability as well. To be more specific, digitalization can enhance public service delivery and foster citizen engagement and participation. Enhanced citizen engagement and participation, as explained before, facilitates participatory governance and democratic governance. The participatory governance will lead to citizen empowerment, particularly that of the vulnerable groups. Also, democratic governance will need to enhance government transparency and accountability with strengthened government capacities. All these elements combined will ultimately lead to inclusiveness and well-being for all. This leads to the importance of e-participation. These are the specific features for e-participation as reviewed by the UN e-Government Survey 2018. E-People of the Republic of Korea is one prominent example of e-participation. It is the online portal system that integrates petition, proposal, and policy discussion on the services operated by about 900 governmental organizations at all levels. Although e-participation is a strong vehicle to increase participatory governance, digital divide is a common challenge faced by many governments, particularly the vulnerable groups such as the poorest or the persons. People in the rural areas do not have access to digital facilities and public services. So, in the process of digital transformation, the government should put digital divide as the priority agenda. As listed by the UN e-Government Survey 2018, there are a big variety of characteristics of digital divide. The contributing factors of digital divide may include education, affordability, gender, disability, location, age, migration, among all. The Information Network Village in Ville of the Republic of Korea is a good example of government initiative. It builds ICT infrastructure and provides digital education to the local communities in rural areas. The Bangladesh Access to Information Initiative, A2I initiative, is another good case in bringing digital divide. Keeping in mind that the rural people have to travel a long way to access government services, the government set more than 5,000 digital centers and district e-service centers. The initiative makes it possible to provide trainings, innovation fund, and digital financial services for minority groups. Lastly, I'd like to conclude my presentation by sharing several key messages. First, digitalization is redefining the roles of state, private sector, and citizens. Second, participatory governance is essential to empower the vulnerable groups and promote well-being for all. Third, digital transformation requires a comprehensive approach that aims at co-creating public value with citizens. Fourth, Government needs a new paradigm shift and strategic thinking, legislation, and regulation. Thank you for listening. Thank you.